Millionaire sees beggar with two children and recognizes her. What he did 10 years ago shocks everyone. Before watching the video, please leave a like and subscribe to support the channel. The wind swept briskly through the bustling city streets as Nicholas Harrington, a man known for his sharp suits and even sharper business mind, stepped out of his sleek black car onto the cold pavement. The day had been like any other. Meetings, numbers, deals. But fate had something else in store. As he waited for the light to change at the crosswalk, his gaze was pulled to a quiet corner near a lamppost. There, huddled against the wind, was a woman with tangled hair, faded clothes, and two small girls curled into her side. One of the children whimpered softly, clinging to her mother's threadbare coat. Nicholas's breath caught in his chest. The woman looked up, and in that moment, time seemed to stand still. Beneath the layers of dirt and despair, he saw Emma Langford, his high school crush, the very girl who once laughed at his awkwardness and shy stammer. But gone was her pride. In its place was exhaustion, heartbreak, and a mother's desperate love. Nicholas felt something shift inside him. He was no longer the invisible boy, and she was no longer untouchable. Despite everything, he couldn't walk away. Not now, not when she needed someone the most. Nicholas Harrington had never believed in fate. Not really. His world was built on logic, strategy, and control. But as he stood on that street corner, staring into the worn, tear-streaked face of Emma Langford, the woman who once ruled his teenage dreams, something inside him cracked open like a dam long sealed shut. He hadn't seen her in years, not since their school days when she was radiant, confident, and far beyond his reach. Back then, he was the quiet, awkward boy with a thrift store wardrobe and a head full of dreams no one believed in. She had been the queen of the halls, adored by everyone, admired from a distance by him. And now, there she was, sitting on the frozen sidewalk in a city that had no mercy for the broken. Her arms wrapped tightly around two small girls, no older than 3 or 4, dressed in mismatched sweaters with holes in the sleeves. One of them, red-cheeked from the cold, clutched a broken doll while the other sniffled into her mother's coat. Nicholas saw Emma's hands trembling as she gently rocked them, her lips murmuring words of comfort through the bitter chill. And though she hadn't looked his way in years, she looked up now and saw him. Recognition bloomed slowly in her tired eyes, and a flicker of shame crossed her face like a shadow passing over the sun. She tried to look away, tried to shrink into herself as if disappearing might erase the past or present. But Nicholas stepped forward, compelled by something more powerful than logic, something closer to grace. "Emma," he said softly, the name tasting like memory. She turned her face, lips parting slightly in disbelief. "Nicholas?" she whispered, as if she were speaking to a ghost. For a moment, silence stretched between them like a bridge suspended over a chasm of years, over lost youth, shattered dreams, and wounds no one ever saw coming. Then Emma lowered her gaze, pulling her daughters even closer. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice hoarse with exhaustion and shame. "Please, just go." But he couldn't, not now. Not after seeing the way one little girl curled against her, teeth chattering, eyes dim with hunger. Not after noticing the raw skin on Emma's knuckles and the deep bruise blooming on her cheek. "You're coming with me," he said, "all of you." "No," she protested immediately, her pride rising through the rubble of her despair. "I don't need your pity. We'll be fine." "Emma," his voice was gentle but firm, "this isn't pity. It's not charity. It's a lifeline. You don't have to say anything. You just have to let me help." Her eyes shimmered, torn between the fierce independence that once defined her and the crushing reality of her circumstances. She hesitated for a heartbeat, then another, and then slowly she nodded. Nicholas immediately called for his driver. When the car arrived minutes later, he lifted one of the girls into his arms, surprised by how light she was. Emma held the other, walking slowly toward the black sedan like someone crossing into another world, one she no longer felt she belonged in. The ride to his estate was silent, except for the soft breaths of the sleeping twins. Emma clutched her daughters as if afraid they might vanish. Nicholas sat beside her, torn between the urge to ask her what had happened and the instinct to let her rest. Her eyes were fixed on the city lights passing through the windows, detached, haunted, and hollow. When the car finally pulled through the grand iron gates of his mansion, Emma's breath caught in her throat. The warmth of the lights spilling from the tall windows, The carefully manicured hedges, the marble steps, it all looked too pristine, too perfect, like a dream she hadn't dared to imagine in years. "I can't go in there," she whispered, pulling back slightly. "This isn't my world anymore." Nicholas turned to her. "It's not about what world you belong to, Emma. It's about what you and those girls need right now, and right now, you need a place to be safe, to breathe, to rest. That's all this is." The housekeeper, Mrs. Ellery, greeted them with a surprised but warm smile, saying nothing but quickly springing into action when Nicholas gently explained the situation. He led Emma and the girls to a cozy room near the back of the house, away from the grand spaces and cold formalities. The fireplace was lit, soft blankets waited on the bed, and the scent of warm bread drifted through the hall. Emma hesitated on the threshold. "This is too much." "It's the bare minimum," Nicholas said, opening the door wider. "Come in." She finally stepped inside, lowering her daughters onto the bed. The girls sighed in relief as the soft mattress welcomed them. Emma sat beside them, brushing hair from their faces with trembling fingers. Nicholas stepped away to give her space, but before he could leave the room, she whispered, "Thank you." Just 2 words, but they carried years of pain, humility, and unspoken gratitude. That night, Nicholas barely slept. He paced his study, heart heavy with the image of Emma curled protectively around her daughters. He couldn't stop asking himself, how did she fall so far? What happened to the girl who once shined so brightly? He needed answers, but more than that, he needed her to be okay. Meanwhile, Emma lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. Her daughter slept soundly beside her for the first time in weeks, maybe months, and yet peace eluded her. She felt like an imposter in this house of warmth and comfort. Guilt gnawed at her heart. She thought of the version of herself she used to be, beautiful, fearless, admired. And she thought of the choices that had brought her here, bad love, broken promises, desperation. But as the fireplace crackled and the wind howled outside, Emma realized something she hadn't dared to hope for in years. Maybe it's not too late. Maybe this is the moment everything begins again. The next morning, Nicholas asked Mrs. Ellery to prepare breakfast for 3. He waited in the dining room, anxiety curling in his gut. Would she come down? Would she accept the help? When Emma finally appeared, holding her girls' hands and wearing a borrowed sweater, he felt an odd swell of relief. The twins giggled softly at the sight of fresh fruit and colorful cereal on the table. Emma's eyes flicked toward him, cautious but no longer full of fear. "You didn't have to do all this," she said quietly. "I know," he replied, "but I wanted to." They sat. The twins ate with joyful abandon, and for a moment the room felt like a home, not just a house. Emma ate slowly, her posture guarded, but Nicholas saw the subtle shift in her shoulders, the way her eyes flickered less with fear and more with quiet surprise. Over the next few days, things began to settle into a strange but comforting rhythm. Nicholas arranged for clothing, toiletries, even books and toys for the girls. Emma protested at first, but the sight of her daughters laughing in the garden, wrapped in clean coats and chasing bubbles, silenced her resistance. She began helping around the house, folding laundry, tidying the kitchen, little acts that helped her feel like she wasn't just a guest, but someone reclaiming her dignity. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees and cast long golden rays into the living room, Emma stood by the window watching her girls. Nicholas stepped beside her, hands in his pockets. "They're smiling again," he said softly. She nodded, her voice thick. "I thought I'd never see that again." Nicholas looked at her, not just at her face, but into her. He saw the pain, yes, but also the courage, the grit, the mother who had chosen her children over her pride. "You don't have to do this alone anymore," he said gently. "You're safe here, Emma." She turned to him, eyes shining. "You don't know what those words mean to someone who's slept on bus benches with babies in her arms." He didn't, but he was learning. And every day she taught him something new about resilience, about quiet strength, and about the power of being seen. This wasn't just a rescue, it was the beginning of something neither of them had expected. For Emma, it was a return to hope. For Nicholas, it was a chance to finally be the man who made a difference. Not just in boardrooms, but in hearts. But dear listener, this is only the beginning. Because what comes next will challenge them both in ways they could never imagine. The past still holds secrets, The heart still holds scars, and love, true love, requires more than shelter. It demands trust, healing, and the courage to open old wounds to let new light in. So stay with me. Keep listening, because Emma and Nicholas's journey is far from over. And the story that started on a street corner in winter is about to unfold into something neither of them expected. Something beautiful, something painful, something unforgettable. And you won't want to miss how it ends. There was a time when Olivia Langford believed life would unfold just as she had dreamed. As a teenager, she had that spark, the one that made everyone notice when she walked into a room. She was bright, full of laughter, and always carried a quiet hope in her heart. Back then, she had dreams of becoming a pediatric nurse, of working in children's hospitals and comforting tiny hands with her gentle voice. She volunteered at a local clinic after school and read every textbook she could afford secondhand. But what she never planned for, what no young heart truly anticipates, was betrayal wrapped in the arms of someone you once trusted. Jake Miller, the boy everyone wanted. Charismatic, athletic, and dripping with confidence. He was everything Olivia believed a partner should be, until the day he proved otherwise. They started dating after prom, just as summer lit up their small town. Jake was charming then, attentive in ways that made her feel seen, and Olivia, with her head full of dreams and a heart open wide, gave him everything, including her trust, including her future. It was 2 months after graduation when she found herself sitting on the bathroom floor of her mother's apartment, holding a pregnancy test in trembling hands. The two pink lines stared back at her like a sentence she didn't understand how to read. At first, she told no one, not even Jake. She went to work, smiled at customers at the cafe where she waitressed, and quietly cried herself to sleep at night. But eventually she found the courage to tell him. She waited until the end of his shift at the car dealership, where he worked part-time, hoping that maybe, just maybe, he'd surprise her with the same kind of trembling joy. But Jake wasn't joyful. His face drained of color. His voice went flat. "You've got to be kidding me," he muttered. She tried to explain, tried to hold his hand, but he pulled away, shaking his head, already checking his phone as if needing a way to disappear. "I'm not ready to be a dad," he said, and those words would be the last he ever spoke to her. In the following days, his phone stopped ringing. His friends stopped looking her in the eye. It was as if she had become a ghost overnight, shunned, erased. She called, messaged, even went to his house once, desperate not just for help, but for acknowledgement. But it was clear, Jake had decided, and she was on her own. Her mother, though not cruel, was distant, more of a roommate than a parent. She didn't yell when Olivia told her, didn't throw her out, but she also didn't offer much support. "You made your bed," she said one night, lighting a cigarette at the kitchen table. "Now you've got to lie in it." Olivia remembered staring at the curling smoke, feeling the floor beneath her fall away. She tried to keep her life on track, worked double shifts at the cafe until her body ached, went to every prenatal appointment alone. When her belly began to show, customers began to stare. Some pitied her, others judged. A few whispered behind menus. She fought to keep her head high. When the twins were born, Hazel and Harper, just 4 minutes apart, she thought maybe the hardest part was over. She was wrong. Her mother moved out 6 weeks after the twins arrived, leaving Olivia with rent she couldn't afford and bills that climbed like vines up the walls. She applied for every job she could find, but the moment employers saw her with 2 infants, the doors quietly closed. "We're looking for someone with more flexibility," they'd say with apologetic eyes that didn't match their words. The cafe let her go when she missed too many shifts to care for the girls. She sold her old textbooks for diapers, skipped meals so they could eat. At night, she rocked them in her arms, whispering promises she didn't know if she could keep. Then came the eviction notice, just a pale envelope tucked in her mailbox that turned her world to ash. She begged the landlord for more time, pleaded with tears in her eyes. But sympathy doesn't pay rent. 2 weeks later, Olivia stood outside her apartment with 2 babies, 3 trash bags full of belongings, and nowhere to go. She stayed in a shelter at first. It was clean and the staff tried their best, but it was crowded, and every night felt like a battle for dignity. She kept her girls close, always close, because even the kindness of strangers felt like a gamble she couldn't afford. When the shelter hit capacity and they had to rotate residents, Olivia found herself on a park bench at 2 a.m., swaddling her daughters in thrift store blankets, praying they wouldn't get sick. She sang lullabies under flickering streetlights, her voice shaking as much from the cold as the fear. Fear of what came next. Fear that one day someone might decide she was unfit. Fear that she'd wake up and the girls would be gone. Sometimes kind people left food or handed her spare change. She remembered a woman in a red scarf who once bought her a coffee and a pack of diapers without saying a word. Those small acts lit brief sparks in the darkness. But more often, people looked right through her as if she and her daughters didn't exist. Invisible, disposable. She began to lose count of the days. She could tell the temperature by how blue the girls' lips turned. She learned to make a can of soup last 3 meals. She got used to the sound of coins rattling in a paper cup. And yet, through it all, Olivia never gave up. Not really, she cried. Yes, she screamed into the wind more than once. But every morning, no matter how broken she felt, she got up. She kissed her daughters' foreheads. She wrapped them in whatever she had. She endured for them. Then came the rainy the day Nicholas found her. She hadn't seen him since high school, hadn't thought about him in years. But that moment, sitting beneath the awning of a bakery, her coat soaked, Harper coughing softly against her shoulder, and Hazel too cold to cry. When she looked up and saw him, standing there with disbelief and heartbreak in his eyes, she thought for sure she was hallucinating. He looked different now, sharp, confident, rich. He had grown into someone she wouldn't recognize, if not for the kindness still lingering in his gaze. She didn't want his help. Not because she didn't need it, but because she didn't feel she deserved it. She had pushed people away. She had made choices. She had fallen. And people didn't come back from that, not really. But Nicholas didn't walk away. He didn't pity her. He saw her. Not just the mother in rags, but the girl who used to dream. And for the first time in years, someone reached down, not to rescue her, but to stand beside her. Now sitting in his mansion days later, watching her daughters play with toys they didn't have to find in garbage bins, Olivia still struggled to believe it was real. The warmth of the rooms, the smell of clean linens, the laughter echoing down the halls, it all felt borrowed, like a story meant for someone else. But Nicholas never treated her like a charity case. He offered help with gentleness, dignity. He asked about her dreams. He encouraged her to study again. He believed in her, even when she couldn't yet believe in herself. And yet, at night when the house grew quiet, the memories crept in. The nights on park benches, the stares, the loneliness, the shame, and the ever-present fear that this could all vanish, that it was too good to last. But Nicholas reminded her, time and time again, that she didn't have to carry it all alone. Then one morning, as sunlight poured through the curtains and the twins danced around her with ribbons in their hair, Olivia realized something she hadn't dared to say out loud. Maybe it's okay to begin again. Maybe she wasn't just surviving anymore. Maybe she was rebuilding. Slowly, painfully, but surely. She looked out the window at the garden where the girls played, and for the first time in years, her heart didn't ache with regret. It pulsed with quiet hope. She wasn't the same girl she used to be. She was stronger now, tempered by storms, sharpened by sorrow. And though her past would always be a part of her, it no longer defined her. What defined her now were the arms of 2 little girls wrapped around her neck each morning, the sound of their laughter, the second chance she never expected, offered by a man who had once been invisible to her, but now stood as the very foundation she leaned on. She still had a long road ahead. Healing isn't linear. Trust takes time. But Olivia had already walked through fire, and now, with her children beside her and Nicholas holding open the door to a better future, she was ready to walk toward the light. There are moments in life when the world seems to pause, just long enough for a person to catch their breath and ask themselves, what now? For Olivia Langford, that moment came on a quiet morning inside Logan Bennett's sunlit mansion, as she sat at a long oak table with a cup of untouched tea growing cold between her hands. Outside, Harper and Hazel laughed in the garden, chasing butterflies like they hadn't spent a single night sleeping beneath an overpass. And across from her, Logan sat patiently, offering not just warmth or kindness, but something far greater. A second chance, the kind that doesn't come wrapped in gold or grandeur, but in gentleness, in faith, in seeing someone not for who they've been, but for who they could still become. You mentioned wanting to work again. Logan said softly, setting down his cup. But what if I told you that it didn't have to stop there? She looked up, surprised, her brows drawn with worry. What do you mean? I mean, what if you didn't just work to survive? What if you studied again, built something real? For you, for the girls? Olivia blinked, almost laughing at the absurdity of the idea. Study? Logan, I haven't even thought about school in years. I barely finished high school. I have no savings, no time, no qualifications, and I'm a mother, he interrupted gently. A strong one, a capable one who's already survived more than most ever will. You don't need to have it all figured out. You just need to be willing to try. She looked away, eyes burning. You've done enough for us. I can't ask for more. You're not asking. I'm offering. You deserve this. Not just a roof over your head, but a future you choose for yourself. Those words hung in the air like gospel, stirring something deep inside her. No one had said those things to her in a long time. Not since before she held two babies in her arms with no idea where their next meal would come from. Not since before people stopped looking at her as a person and began seeing her as a burden. Later that evening, after the girls had been tucked into their new beds and the moonlight spilled like silver across the floor, Olivia sat alone in the living room, staring at the flickering fire. Logan entered quietly, placing a folder in her lap. Inside were printouts, local programs for business courses, online classes, GED prep. She traced her fingers across the pages, each word heavy with possibility. Just look them over, he said. No pressure. She looked up at him, her voice small. Why are you doing all this for me? Logan knelt beside her, eyes steady. Because I believe in you. I've seen the way you fight for your daughters, the way you carry so much pain, but still show up every single day. That strength, it's rare, and I'd be a fool not to support it. That night, Olivia didn't sleep. She lay in bed beside her girls, listening to their soft breathing and thinking about every closed door she had faced. And now here was one opening. Slowly, gently. She only had to take the step. The next morning, with trembling fingers, she handed Logan a page she had circled from the packet, a basic business administration course with a flexible schedule. I want to try, she whispered. Logan smiled. Then we'll try together. And so it began. It wasn't easy. Olivia hadn't studied in years. The first time she sat at a desk with a blank notepad in front of her, she felt the old panic rise in her chest. What if I'm not smart enough? What if I fail again? But then she heard the distant laughter of Harper and Hazel outside and reminded herself why she was doing this. For them, for her, for the version of herself she had almost buried beneath years of disappointment. Every morning she woke before the girls, reviewed notes by the kitchen window, and helped pack their lunches with the housekeeper's gentle assistance. She attended classes online during the day, and at night she studied by the light of a small lamp, whispering terms to herself like prayers: equity, marketing, revenue. It was hard. There were tears. There were moments she wanted to quit. But every time she faltered, Logan was there. He set up a small home office just for her, brought her snacks when she forgot to eat, encouraged her to take breaks, helped quiz her before exams. You're doing amazing, and he'd say, and though she didn't always believe it, she kept going, if only because someone finally did. And something remarkable began to happen. Olivia started to change. The lines of worry around her eyes softened. Her shoulders, once heavy with invisible burdens, began to straighten. She smiled more, laughed easier. She started suggesting recipes to the cook and volunteered to help organize the children's corner in the local community center. Her voice grew steadier, more confident, and Logan noticed it all. One afternoon, after several weeks had passed, Logan surprised her with a small, wrapped gift. Inside was a pen, a beautiful pearl-handled pen with her initials engraved. What's this? She asked, genuinely puzzled. A tool, he said with a smile, for writing your future. Olivia clutched it to her chest, fighting tears. It wasn't the value of the gift. It was the meaning. That someone saw her not just as a survivor, but as someone deserving to dream again. A few weeks later, Logan took her to his office downtown, just for a visit, he said. But as they walked through the glass doors and the staff greeted her with kind eyes and warm smiles, Olivia felt something stir inside her. Possibility. He led her to a sunlit meeting room where a binder sat waiting for her. "What's this?" she asked cautiously. "A project assistant role," he replied. "Flexible hours, nothing overwhelming. But it's a start, a way for you to put everything you're learning into practice. Only if you want it." She stared at the binder. "I'm not sure I'm ready." "You don't have to be ready." Heidi, Logan said. "You just have to be willing." And she was. Oh, she was. Because she wasn't just rebuilding her life, she was reclaiming it. Over time, Olivia found her rhythm. She worked 3 afternoons a week, contributing to real projects, sitting in on meetings, even pitching small ideas. Slowly, people began turning to her for insight. She was no longer invisible, no longer voiceless. And when she returned home at night to the arms of her daughters and the warmth of Logan's quiet praise, she felt something she hadn't in years: pride. But still, there were moments of doubt. Moments when a voice deep in her mind whispered, "You don't belong here. This isn't really your life." And on those days, Logan never pushed. He simply sat beside her, reminding her, "You belong exactly where you are, and you're not alone anymore." And dear listener, maybe you've known someone like Olivia. Maybe you've been Olivia, someone who once had dreams, only to watch life bury them under the weight of loss, abandonment, and survival. Maybe you know how heavy the climb back can feel. And if you do, let Olivia's story remind you, second chances aren't fairy tales, they're real. But they're born in pain, forged in resilience, and lifted by the hands of those who refuse to give up on you. If Olivia's story moved you, if you believe in redemption, in rising after the fall, leave a like. Comment below with a word of encouragement. Tell Olivia she's not alone. Let her know that her fight, her courage, her will to begin again, it matters. Because somewhere out there, someone else needs to hear this story. Someone else needs to know that it's not too late. So write "You're stronger than you think" in the comments if you've made it this far. Or keep going, Olivia, if you believe she's just getting started. Because she is. In the next chapter, it's hers to write. The pages of Olivia Langford's life had started to turn again. On then, slowly, shakily, but with each day she spent studying by the window while Harper and Hazel played in the garden, she felt herself inching closer to a version of life she'd almost forgotten to believe in. Each lesson completed, each online class passed, each spreadsheet reviewed at Logan's office. It wasn't just progress, it was healing. She was building something. Not just a career, not just a future, but a self. One not defined by desperation, but by determination. One not marked by rejection, but reborn in resilience. And through it all, Logan Bennett stood beside her, not as a savior, but as a witness, as a partner in quiet, steady faith. The kind of man who didn't need to say, "I believe in you" every day, because he proved it in the way he listened, in the way he celebrated even the smallest of her victories, and in the way he never ever looked at her with pity. Only pride. But as Olivia grew into this new life, this tender, blossoming version of herself, there was one shadow she could not outrun. Jake, the father of her children, the boy who once held her hand beneath the bleachers and whispered empty promises about forever. The man who vanished the moment she said, "I'm pregnant." He had never seen the girls, never called, never asked, and yet he still lingered in her mind like an unhealed bruise. And if she were to truly move forward, Olivia knew she had to face the past, once and for all. One evening, after a long day reviewing a business proposal and helping the twins with their picture books, Olivia sat in Logan's home office staring at her phone. Her hands trembled slightly, hovering over a name in her contacts that hadn't been touched in years: Jake Miller. Logan entered quietly, a cup of chamomile tea in hand. "You okay?" he asked, setting the mug down beside her. I think I need to call him," she whispered. "Jake." Logan's jaw tensed, but his voice remained calm. "Are you sure?" She nodded barely. "Not for me, not really. For the girls, I need to be able to tell them one day that I tried, that I gave them the chance to be part of their lives." Logan didn't say much. He just placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "Whatever happens, I'm here." That night, with the twins asleep and the house dark except for the faint glow of the hallway light, Olivia dialed the number. It rang once, twice, then, "Yeah," came the voice. Rough, uninterested. Older, but unmistakably Jake's. There was a silence. Olivia's breath caught in her throat. It's Olivia. Another pause. Oh, I, I just wanted to talk. A sigh crackled through the line. About what? The girls, Harper and Hazel. Your daughters. Jake scoffed softly. Look, Olivia, I made it clear years ago. I'm not interested. You chose to keep them. That was your decision. Her hands tightened around the phone. They're not a choice. They're children. They're your children. Jake's voice grew cold. Don't lay this on me. I moved on. I've got a new life now. I don't owe you anything. And with that, the line went dead. Olivia sat frozen, staring at the phone in her hand, its black screen reflecting her wide, stunned eyes. There it was, the final nail in the coffin of a chapter she had clung to for too long. She had hoped deep down that maybe he'd at least ask about them. Maybe he'd feel a flicker of guilt, of curiosity, of something. But there was nothing, not even a trace of remorse. When Logan found her an hour later, she was still sitting in the same spot, her shoulders slumped, eyes glistening but dry. I called him, she said softly. He knelt beside her, concern etched across his face. And? He doesn't care. He never did. Her voice trembled. And you know what? That hurts. But it also sets me free. Logan reached for her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. He doesn't deserve them. He doesn't deserve you. I needed to hear it, she whispered, almost to herself. I needed to be sure there was nothing left to wait for. And in that moment, something shifted. Not just in her heart, but in her soul. Because closure doesn't always come with apologies or redemption. Sometimes it comes with silence, with doors finally slamming shut, so you can begin walking through the ones that are open. The days that followed weren't easy. There were nights Olivia cried into her pillow, mourning not the loss of Jake, but the loss of the dream she once had, of a family that never was, of a young girl who believed that love meant someone would stay. But with every tear, she felt lighter, stronger. She poured her pain into her work, into her studies, into the arms of her daughters, who were always there with sticky fingers and sunshine smiles to remind her why she couldn't and wouldn't give up. She began to laugh more openly, to look Logan in the eyes without flinching. She took on more responsibility at his company, handling tasks that once scared her with grace and focus. One afternoon, Logan introduced her in a meeting as a rising star. She blushed, but held her own, pitching an idea that earned the room's approval. That night, after the twins had drifted off to sleep, Olivia and Logan sat under the stars on the terrace, the same terrace where so many of their pivotal moments had quietly unfolded. I don't think I ever said thank you, she murmured. You don't have to, Logan said. I do, she insisted. You gave me space to grow, and you never pushed. You just believed, even when I didn't. He looked at her then, not with expectation, not with desire, but with something far deeper. Respect, admiration, a kind of quiet, profound love that asks for nothing and gives everything. You've done this, he said. All I did was light a candle. You built the fire. And dear listener, if you're still with us, if Olivia's story has moved you, leave her a message in the comments. Let her know she's not alone, that the road she's walked, the strength she's shown, it matters. Because Olivia Langford is not just a character in a story. She is every woman who was abandoned, every mother who stayed strong, every survivor who dared to believe again. And she's just getting started. It was one of those quiet evenings when the world seemed to hold its breath, the sky wrapped in the fading colors of dusk, the wind gentle and warm, and the soft glow of lanterns flickering around the garden like whispered promises. Olivia Langford stood on the edge of the terrace, the scent of jasmine drifting through the air, her arms wrapped around herself not from cold, but from wonder. Below her, Harper and Hazel danced barefoot on the grasses, laughing as they chased fireflies, their giggles painting the air with pure, unfiltered joy. And behind her, standing a few steps away, with his hands buried deep in his pockets and his heart beating loud enough to echo in his chest, was Logan Bennett, the man who had once simply offered her shelter, but had given her so much more. Olivia turned slightly and caught his gaze. There was something different about it tonight. Softer, deeper, more certain. He stepped closer slowly, as if he didn't want to rush what was about to unfold. The sky stretched out above them, darkening into deep velvet, and the world for a moment belonged to just the two of them. "Do you remember," he began, his voice low, "the first night you stood here?" She nodded, her smile tinged with memory. "I was scared. Everything felt like a dream I didn't belong in." "And now?" he asked. Olivia looked back at her daughters. Their hair danced in the breeze, their cheeks pink from laughter. Then her eyes returned to him. "Now it feels like home." Logan swallowed hard. His hand slipped into his coat pocket, his fingers closing around a small velvet box that had been waiting there for days. Weeks, if he was honest with himself. Because from the moment he saw Olivia in his home, from the first time she trusted him enough to cry in front of him, to share her past, not the pretty version, but the raw truth, he knew. This woman, this fierce, tired, resilient woman with eyes that had seen both darkness and light, she was the one. He dropped to one knee, Olivia's breath caught in her throat. Her hands flew to her mouth as tears rushed to her eyes without warning. The moment slowed. The sound of crickets, the hush of wind, the golden lights of the mansion behind them, all faded as her eyes locked onto his. "Olivia Langford," Logan began, voice shaking with emotion. "You walked into my life when you had every reason to shut the world out. You taught me more about strength, about grace, about what it means to love, than I ever thought possible. And these girls," he looked toward Harper and Hazel, who had stopped to watch, their tiny hands clasped together in silent excitement. "They're not just your daughters anymore. They're part of me too. I love them. I love you. And if you'll let me, I want to spend the rest of my life making you feel safe and seen and loved. Will you marry me?" The silence that followed was not hesitation. It was sacred. Olivia stepped forward, dropping to her knees and wrapped her arms around him. Her tears fell freely now, warm and full of everything she had never thought she'd feel again. Hope, joy, love. "Yes," she whispered into his neck. "Yes, Logan. Yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger. Simple, elegant, perfect. And when their lips met, it wasn't the kiss of a fairy tale ending. It was a kiss of new beginnings, forged in fire, softened by time, made real by every storm they had survived. That night, as Olivia lay in bed between her two sleeping daughters, the moon casting gentle light across her pillow, she held her left hand up and stared at the ring, glinting in the quiet. How had this happened? How had a woman once too ashamed to look people in the eye found herself loved, truly, deeply loved, by a man who saw every broken piece and chose to cherish them? The weeks that followed were filled with tender planning. Olivia didn't want a grand wedding. She didn't want a ballroom or lace-covered altars. She wanted realness, intimacy, a day that felt like the life they were building together, quiet, heartfelt, and rooted in love. Logan understood completely. They chose the garden. Harper and Hazel were the first to learn their roles. "Flower girls?" Hazel squeaked. "Does that mean we get dresses with sparkles?" "Yes," Olivia smiled. "Sparkles and petals and baskets." "And do we get to walk down the path before you?" Harper asked, her eyes wide. "You do," Logan said, lifting her into his arms. "And you'll lead the way for your mommy." The day of the wedding arrived with a soft breeze and the scent of fresh roses blooming under the spring sun. The garden had been transformed into a wonderland of pale pinks, creams, and light gold. Chairs were arranged in a circle, not rows, because Olivia wanted everyone to feel close, not distant. There were only a handful of guests, people who had earned a place in their hearts, not just a spot on a guest list. The housekeeper, who had become like family. A few members of Logan's company who had quietly supported Olivia's journey. And the twins, of course, front and center, wearing their sparkly dresses and holding tiny baskets filled with petals they tossed with giggles and dramatic flair. Olivia stood just beyond the garden gates, her heart pounding in her chest. Her dress was simple, white cotton and lace, elegant in its softness, flowing like poetry with each step she took. Her hair was pinned with baby's breath, and her hands trembled slightly as she held the small bouquet Logan had picked himself that morning. When the music began, just a single violin playing a tune that felt like the sound of falling in love, she stepped forward, and there, waiting for her under the arbor covered in ivy and light, was Logan. He didn't look nervous. He looked at peace, the way a man looks when he knows he's exactly where he's meant to be. Their vows were not perfect, but they were theirs. Olivia's voice cracked as she spoke of the night she had first arrived at his door, lost and scared. "You didn't just take me in," she said. "You saw me when I couldn't see myself anymore." Logan spoke of his loneliness before her, the quiet echo of his mansion, and how her laughter and the tiny feet of her daughters had turned his house into a home. They sealed their promises with tears, with laughter, and with a kiss that carried the weight of every moment that had led them there. Dear listener, if your heart is full right now, if you've followed Olivia's story from those cold, trembling nights on the sidewalk to this warm garden where she says, "I do," please leave a comment. Let her know she's not just a voice in a story. She's a reflection of so many who have fought to believe in love again. Because this wasn't just a wedding. This was a homecoming. After the ceremony, Olivia, Logan, and the girls danced in the garden as the sun dipped low behind the trees. There were no flashing lights, no loud music, just the soft hum of a new life being born. Harper and Hazel twirled between their mother and Logan, their laughter filling the air with a kind of joy that made even the flowers seem to sway in rhythm. And later that night, as Logan carried Olivia across the threshold, not out of tradition, but out of love, they paused. In the quiet of the entryway, with moonlight casting silver shadows on the marble floor, Olivia whispered, "I never thought I'd have this." Logan looked at her, eyes soft. "You were always meant to." And now, together, they would begin again, not as two souls wounded by the past, but as a family healed by the present and anchored in hope for the future. It started as a whisper, soft, almost imperceptible, inside Olivia Langford's body. A flutter in the quiet moments, a shift in energy, a faint dizziness that came and went without reason. At first, she brushed it off. She had been pushing herself harder lately, balancing coursework, her part-time job at Logan's firm, and motherhood. There were reports to read, meetings to sit in, and Harper and Hazel to tuck into bed every night. Surely the fatigue was just life catching up. But one morning, as sunlight spilled over the kitchen counter and Harper danced barefoot across the floor, while Hazel tried to pour cereal into a bowl too big for her tiny hands, Olivia paused. One hand rested instinctively against her lower belly, and she knew. Before the test, before the doctor, she knew with the quiet certainty that only mothers have, there was a new life growing inside her. That afternoon, while the girls were painting in the sunroom, she slipped away to the clinic just to be sure. She sat in the sterile white room, her fingers curled tightly in her lap, her heart pounding with questions that tumbled over each other. What will Logan say? Can I do this again? Am I ready to bring another child into this world? This time, with hope instead of fear? The nurse returned moments later with a soft smile and two simple words. "Congratulations, Olivia." That was all it took. A tear slipped down her cheek, not from fear, but from something deeper. A kind of awe, a realization that life had decided once again to give her a chance to grow. When she returned to the house, Logan was in the living room helping the twins build a pillow fort. His sleeves were rolled up, his hair slightly tousled from sticky toddler fingers, and his laugh, deep and unguarded, rumbled through the space like music. Olivia stood in the doorway for a moment, watching them, her hand drifting once again to her stomach. This wasn't how she imagined telling him, not in the middle of blankets and foam blocks. But this was their life now. Messy, warm, unexpected, and full. "Logan," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He looked up immediately, concern flickering across his features at her tone. He stood, brushing a feather off his shirt, and crossed the room. "What is it? Are you okay?" Olivia nodded slowly. Then she reached for his hand, placed it gently against her stomach, and said the words that made time stop. "I'm pregnant." For a moment he was still, completely still. Then his face broke into something Olivia would never forget, a smile that reached all the way to his soul. He pulled her into a hug so tight it nearly stole her breath, one hand cradling the back of her head, the other resting protectively over where their child now grew. "You're pregnant?" he said again, as if needing to hear it once more to believe it. She nodded, eyes wet. "Yes, we're going to have a baby." He leaned back to look at her, his expression awash with emotion. Love, wonder, even a hint of disbelief. "This is the most beautiful surprise I've ever had." The days that followed were filled with a kind of day Olivia had never known before. The twins squealed with excitement when they found out. "We're going to be big sisters?" Harper asked, eyes wide like the moon. Hazel jumped up and down, immediately declaring she would teach the baby how to draw cats. Logan, true to his nature, took to preparing with quiet dedication. He read parenting articles late at night, reorganized the house to make room, and arranged doctor appointments with the kind of attentiveness that made Olivia feel utterly seen and cared for. He'd hold her hand at every checkup, ask questions she hadn't even thought of, and kiss her forehead afterward like it was a ritual of reassurance. But pregnancy is rarely perfect. At 12 weeks, during a routine scan, the doctor gently mentioned something that sent a chill through Olivia's veins, a small concern, a marker. Nothing conclusive, but enough to warrant caution. Olivia sat in silence as the words floated around her like shadows. High risk, complications, observation. Her breath caught in her throat. Her mind flashed back to the night she spent under bridges with Harper and Hazel in her arms, terrified of the future, of the unknown. She thought she had outrun that fear, but now it found her again. Logan's grip on her hand tightened. He didn't flinch. He didn't panic. He turned to the doctor and asked calmly, "What do we need to do?" When they got home that night, he didn't speak right away. He made Olivia tea, tucked the girls into bed, and finally joined her on the sofa, where she sat curled up, lost in thought. "You're scared," he said softly. She nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I don't want to lose this. I don't want to go back to that place where I feel like I'm holding everything together with tape." Logan turned toward her, his voice steady. "You won't have to. I'm here. We'll take this one step at a time. And no matter what happens, you're not alone anymore, Olivia." From that day forward, Logan became not just a partner, but a guardian. He made her rest when she wanted to do too much. He left notes on the bathroom mirror, small words like, "You're doing amazing," or "Our baby's lucky to have you." He made smoothies packed with nutrients she couldn't pronounce, ran warm baths on hard days, and always held her when her fears crept in after dark. And Olivia, she began to trust her body again, to believe that this time could be different, not just because she had Logan, but because she was different, stronger, softer in the right places, tough where it mattered. She learned to listen to the baby's movements like music, to cherish the weight of her growing belly, not as a burden, but as a blessing. Harper and Hazel sang songs to her stomach, kissed it goodnight, and drew pictures of what they thought the baby would look like. "Do you think the baby will love peanut butter?" Hazel asked one night, serious as always. "I think the baby will love whatever you love," Olivia smiled. As the months passed, the nursery took shape, a room filled with soft greens and creams, sunlight that poured through the windows, and a rocking chair Logan had restored by hand. Every part of the room that whispered, "You are wanted, you are loved, we've been waiting for you." And dear listener, if your heart is full right now, if you've walked this road with Olivia from heartbreak to healing, take a moment. Leave her a message in the comments. Let her know she's not alone. Because Olivia's story is not just about surviving, it's about blooming. It's about holding love in trembling hands and choosing to believe in it anyway. It's about looking in the mirror and finally seeing a woman who is not broken, not burdened, but becoming. And then, on a calm spring night, after weeks of rest and quiet anticipation, Olivia went into labor. Logan, ever the rock, stayed composed, helping her into the car, whispering encouragement between contractions. Never leaving her side at the hospital, the hours blurred together in a mix of pain and power, breath and sweat, until at last a cry broke through the silence. It was a boy. Olivia wept the moment she heard him, an ache of joy she hadn't known her heart could hold. The nurse placed the baby in her arms, and as she cradled him against her chest, she whispered, "You're here. You're finally here." Logan stood beside her, tears in his eyes, unable to speak. He reached down, touching his son's tiny hand, and something inside him softened in a way that would never harden again. They named him Noah James Bennett, a name that meant rest, comfort, new beginning. And as Olivia lay there, her daughters asleep in the waiting room, and her newborn nestled in her arms, she looked at Logan and smiled through the tears. "I didn't think I'd ever feel this whole." Logan kissed her forehead, resting his hand over hers. "You are everything I never knew I needed," he whispered. "And this is our forever." The house was quiet, bathed in the golden light of late afternoon. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, and the garden, once a place of hesitant first steps and whispered promises, was now alive with laughter. Olivia Langford stood by the window, rocking gently as she cradled her newborn son Noah against her chest. The weight of him, warm and real, reminded her how far she'd come. His tiny fingers curled around hers, soft and trusting, and tears welled in her eyes, not from pain, not from fear, but from something else entirely: peace. Harper and Hazel were playing in the yard, their hair catching the sunlight as they danced in circles, and just a few feet behind her, Logan stood watching all three of them, a quiet smile on his face, his hands tucked into his pockets like a man who had found everything he ever needed. This was the ending Olivia never dared to dream of during those long nights on the street, those bitterly cold mornings when she crouched behind a bus stop with her daughters wrapped in blankets that smelled of damp and dust. She had known loneliness so complete it echoed. She had felt shame so heavy it choked her voice. And yet, she had never given up. Not on her girls, not on herself. And because she didn't, she was here now, wrapped in warmth, surrounded by love, and watching a life unfold that was stitched together by grace, not luck. It hadn't been a perfect road. There were stumbles, there were tears that came without warning. There were nights when she still questioned if she belonged in this new life, or if somehow it would all disappear. But Logan never wavered. He met every doubt with patience, every scar with love. He didn't just build her a home. He made space in his heart for all of her past, her wounds, her fierce protectiveness, her softness, her hope. And she did the same for him. Because love, real love, isn't about rescuing someone. It's about seeing them exactly as they are and choosing them anyway. And now, months after Noah's birth, life had found a rhythm. Olivia had returned to her studies with renewed confidence. She balanced her coursework with working part-time at Logan's firm and still made it home in time to help Hazel with her reading and braid Harper's hair before bed. Her hands were full, but her heart was fuller. She had even started mentoring young mothers at a local shelter, using her own story as a bridge to hope. "I was where you are," she would say, "but I promise it doesn't have to end there." And Logan, he became not just a husband, but a father in every sense of the word. He read bedtime stories with voices and sound effects that made the girls giggle until they couldn't breathe. He changed diapers without complaint. He built Noah's crib by hand. He showed up again and again in small ways that built something unshakable between them. On their first wedding anniversary, Logan surprised Olivia with a picnic in the same garden where they'd shared their first kiss. The kids helped pack the basket, stuffing it with cookies and crayon drawings, and as the sun dipped low, they all sat under a canopy of stars, the sound of crickets echoing softly around them. "I never thought life could feel like this," Olivia whispered as she leaned against his shoulder. Logan kissed her temple and replied, "It always could. You just needed someone to believe in it with you." And dear listener, maybe you've been where Olivia once was. Maybe you know what it feels like to be overlooked, to be knocked down by life and left wondering if there's anything left to hope for. Or maybe you know someone, your daughter, your sister, your friend, who's struggling to believe that healing is even possible. If that's you, if any part of this story touched your heart, I want to gently remind you, it's never too late, not too late to start again, not too late to dream differently, not too late to forgive yourself for where you've been and step forward into where you were meant to go. Olivia's journey wasn't easy, but it was real, and it was worth every step. Because she didn't just survive her past, she transformed it. She didn't erase her pain, she wove it into the fabric of her strength. She didn't pretend the hard days never happened. She used them as fuel to fight for better ones. And she didn't wait for the world to save her. She stood up, brick by brick, and built a new life, one that her children could thrive in, one that Logan could share, one that finally felt like home. And now, as the camera slowly pans out from that peaceful home, the laughter of children in the background, the fading sun casting golden light across the porch, you see her there. Olivia Langford, once a beggar in the shadows, now a mother, a wife, a woman reborn. And if you followed her story from the beginning, from that rainy street corner where a man named Logan stopped and saw someone no one else would, to this moment of calm, of victory, of full circle redemption. I want to invite you to do one last thing. Leave a comment below. Write, "We believe in you, Olivia," if you're proud of how far she's come. Or type, "I'm starting over too," if you see yourself somewhere in her journey. Let this space be one of kindness for her and for anyone else who's still climbing. Share your thoughts. Your words matter more than you know. Like this video if it made you feel something, anything. If it reminded you that good still exists, that people can change, that healing is real. And most importantly, subscribe to this channel if you want more stories like this. Stories that remind us all of what we're made of. Stories that pull at the heart, stir the soul, and help us believe again. Because this isn't the end. It's the beginning of many more. And Olivia, she's not the only one with a story worth telling. You are too. So until next time, remember, you are never too lost to be found, never too broken to be loved, and never too far gone to come home. Thank you for listening. We'll see you in the next story.